Exposed, Billionaire's shock as he discovers his ex and twins texting for shelter in the cold. Julian Hart had it all: wealth, power, and a booming tech empire in Chicago. But as the blistering winter wind howled outside his penthouse, his heart raced with a different kind of anxiety. He glanced at his phone, and the words from Emma sliced through the facade he had built. "We're out in the cold, Julian. Please, we need shelter." The panic in her message ignited a firestorm of conflicting emotions. His first instinct was to retreat, to ignore the stinging regret that haunted him since their bitter divorce. Yet, the thought of Mia and Jake, alone and vulnerable in temperatures plummeting to dangerous lows, gripped him tighter than any boardroom meeting ever could. Years of divorce litigation, accumulated resentment, and heartaches rushed back, crashing against the walls he had so carefully constructed around his life. His mind spiraled, doubt clawing at the edges of his resolve. How could he have let it get this far? He recalled evenings filled with laughter, little feet rushing through their home, the warmth of family dinners that now seemed like scenes from a distant, forgotten movie. As he paced the luxurious floors of his penthouse, the ambience of success felt like a hollow victory. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue, he muttered to himself. What should I even say? His heart thudded heavily in his chest, weighed down with the knowledge that he had chosen work over family, ambition over love. The gnawing fear of rejection loomed darker than the night outside. What if they turned him away? Would his presence be just a reminder of everything he had once thrown away? Julian hesitated, fingers hovering over his screen as he fought against the urge to spiral deeper into despair. Each moment of indecision felt like a freeze frame of regret. The wind outside screeched like a warning siren, emphasizing the rampant urgency of his thoughts. He finally typed a message offering assistance. The descent of the send button felt monumental. He stared at the screen, anxiously watching for Emma's reply. When it came, the skepticism in her words was sharp, the bitter echo of his past decisions that had built walls of distrust. "You, of all people, suddenly care?" Julian's stomach turned, grief and anger battling inside him like an unholy storm. Then, another notification. This time, it was Mia. Her text was an intricate weave of anger and desperation. He could feel the years spent apart coiling tightly around them, each word a serrated knife. He grappled with the crushing realization that wealth couldn't heal the chasm of broken trust. The ticking of the clock grew deafening, a reminder that with each passing moment, he was losing the chance at redemption. As he paced, the lights from the Chicago skyline flickered, reflecting in his eyes like the fragmented memories of a past life. Was it too late for forgiveness? Could he risk stepping back into the frozen memories and wounds of a family he had once cherished? The tempest of internal conflict raged wildly as he wrestled with one truth: reconciliation felt as far away as warmth on this bitter night. And as the snow fell heavier outside, Julian braced for the choice he knew he had to make. Julian's mind swirled with images of what had been ripped away from him: spirited family vacations, bedtime stories, and the innocent laughter that once filled their home. It felt surreal, how quickly everything had unraveled. He could choose to stay frozen in the safety of his penthouse, or venture into the chilling streets of Chicago, where his past awaited. The realization settled like a stone in his stomach. He wouldn't just be facing Emma or even Mia and Jake. He would have to confront himself, the man he had become during the years of isolation and ambition. That version of himself was successful, yet strangely hollow. The stakes were not just about granting shelter from the cold, it was about reckoning with every poor decision that brought them to this moment. His fingers danced hesitantly over the keys again, drafting a message that felt like a lifeline. "I'm coming. Just hold on." He pressed send, the message a small victory against the tides of self-doubt coursing through him. He would make this right, or at least attempt to. Strength surged through his veins like the first rays of hope piercing a winter's dawn. With mistakes weighing heavily in mind, Julian navigated down to the street in a hasty plan. He caught the scent of cold air that stung his lungs sharply, a bitter reminder of his reality. The city was buzzing, voices and laughter mingling with the metal grinding of streetcars. It felt foreign to him now. He opted for a ride share, pulling up a map, looking for the last known location where Emma had sent her distress signal. Doing business in this city, he had become attuned to the clock. Time was money, precision was paramount. Now, however, each second on the dashboard felt like an eternity. The distance seemed infinite, echoing the emotional gap between them. In the back seat, he replayed conversations he had left unsaid, nearly choking on the words that had been silenced by distance and pride. When he arrived, the sight of them huddled together brought an unfamiliar warmth and deep-seated dread. Mia and Jake stood too close to each other, their little arms wrapped tightly around their mother's waist. The three caught in a moment that felt wrongfully perfect yet excruciatingly painful for him to witness. Emma noticed him first, her frown deepening as she shielded her children. There was an unyielding mixture of anger and desperation in her expression, striking a nerve he thought had grown numb over the years. "What the hell are you doing here, Julian?" She shot at him, her voice carrying the weight of her past grievances. Julian inhaled deeply. "I know I don't deserve your trust, but I want to help. You don't have to be out here. That's all you have to say? You think you can just waltz back in after years of neglect?" Her words hit him like ice shards, each one infused with the raw hurt he had ignored for far too long. "But I'm here now," he managed, struggling to keep his voice steady. "And I want to try to make amends, to do what I should have done." Mia turned, her young face shadowed by suspicion, a flicker of recognition swimming in her doe-like eyes. "Why now, Dad? Where were you last time we needed you?" Julian's heart sank under the gravity of her question. Could he articulate the weight of absence? The depths of his failures? In the midst of the storm brewing silently between them, he felt a fragile urge to break down his defenses more than ever. He beckoned toward them, a gesture symbolic of opening a door he wanted to lead. But could he navigate their raid of uncertainty for the sake of reparation? As Emma surveyed him silently, the intensity simmered between them, charged with potential for either connection or complete rupture. As the wind whipped through the surrounding streets, Julian found himself at the brink of an emotional precipice. Would he be able to embrace this challenge or linger in the shadows of his remorse? The moment of confrontation loomed heavily ahead, and Julian realized this would be just the first step toward an intricate dance of forgiveness and familial bonding. Was he ready to face the truth about himself? Or would the walls he had built come crashing down once again, just as the snow began to fall quietly around them, covering wounds that had long been left exposed? Julian stood there, exposed to the unforgiving Chicago wind, at the crossroads of fear and determination. Emma's glare bore into him, a mixture of disbelief and anger etched on her features. He took a step forward, his voice trembling but resolute. "I know it will take more than words to prove myself, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to understand, to be a father again." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Mia and Jake's eyes darted between their mother and their estranged father, confusion evident on their small faces. Each blink from them felt like a reminder of the years lost, of opportunities unseized. Julian understood that this wasn't merely an apology he could offer, it was a profound commitment to alter the narrative that had long been written, a story in which he had been a ghost. Emma finally exhaled, a shaky breath. "Understanding?" Her sarcasm sliced through the stillness. "What do you know about understanding, Julian? You left us when we needed you the most. Did success really mean that much to you?" Each syllable of her accusation hit him hard. It was true. Success had become his horizon, obscuring the relationships that had once defined him. The emptiness he felt now was a staggering realization of neglect, not just to his family, but to his own sense of self. "I thought chasing what I believed to be a better life would provide for you all," he conceded, his voice barely a whisper. "But in reality, I was chasing shadows." He noticed Mia's furrowed brow. "You could have just done both," she mumbled, a child's logic streaked with painful clarity. It was a simple statement, yet it struck him more deeply than Emma's furious retorts. How had he not understood that prioritizing his family wasn't a sacrifice? It was essential. Julia shifted closer, his heart racing. "I've spent too long allowing work to dictate who I was. I want to let myself slip away again. Let me show you that I can be here for you, in every way you need. But pragmatism collided painfully with hope. Emma's skepticism chilled him anew. You think showing up changes everything? She tilted her head, drawing strength from the children at her side. This isn't some business deal you can negotiate. The emotional tension crackled between them. Julian felt the walls inching closer. It struck him then that true growth often demanded uncomfortable truths. Was he prepared to unravel not only the facade he built but also his profound insecurities? I know it'll take time. I need to start somewhere, he murmured. Perhaps we can have dinner together, just the four of us? At this invitation, silence stretched again, and he felt a flicker of hope hover in the chilly air. Dinner? You think that's enough? Emma's voice softened, but it was still lined with hesitation. Maybe it is just the start, Julian replied, each word a careful step on fragile ground. The offer was more than a meal, it was a promise of rebuilding, of being present and accountable. Fine, Emma finally relented, her eyes narrowing as if weighing this tentative offer against a lifetime of hurt. But you're not getting ahead of yourself. No promises. Julian nodded, grateful for this first fragment of hope but fully aware of the mountain he still needed to climb. As they exchanged contact details, his mind shifted into overdrive. What else did he need to change about himself to be worthy of this second chance? With uncertainty riding his shoulders and determination propelling him forward, Julian stepped back into the bustling streets. Each footfall felt heavier now, not just with doubt but with the anticipation of what lay ahead. He was entering a phase of personal reckoning, a journey toward authenticity he had long avoided. It wouldn't be easy, he knew. Every experience would require introspection, honesty, and the conscious dismantling of ingrained habits. But for the first time, he was willing to confront this daunting endeavor. As he turned to leave, his gaze lingered on Emma and the children, a fragile connection re-established but fraught with challenges. Would they allow him back into their hearts? Would he remain steadfast enough not to retreat this time? The weight of reformation settled on him like a cloak. Julian whispered to himself, I can do this. But could he harness vulnerability to forge deeper connections, or would his fears draw him back into the shadows he had known so well? The bustling city contrasted sharply with his quiet resolve as he navigated his thoughts. A nagging question shadowed him. What if, in his quest for redemption, he discovered something about himself he wasn't prepared for? Would he emerge renewed, or would the past find a way to entangle him once more? As those daunting thoughts flickered through his mind, he realized his journey was just beginning, and the uncertainties loomed large ahead. Julian paced the narrow hallway of his apartment, a space once filled with accolades and hollow victories. Now, it felt like a cage, one where the walls pressed against his growing resolve. His mind raced with thoughts of Emma and the kids, the raw emotion from their earlier encounter replaying on a loop. He struck a subconscious deal with himself. He would not let fear dictate his next moves. As he poured himself a glass of water, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the kitchen window. Disheveled hair, a weary expression. The man staring back was both a product of his ambition and a stranger. Would showing up for dinner transform the stranger back into a father? He allowed himself a moment to ponder what being a father truly meant. Was it the role of provider, or was it deeper rooted in emotional presence and unconditional support? His phone buzzed, breaking his reverie. It was a message from Emma, dinner at 7. It's a chance for you to show whether you mean what you said. The message left both tinges of anxiety and a spark of resolve bubbling beneath the surface. He wanted it to be meaningful, not just a formality, yet the heavy history of failure loomed above him. Over the next few hours, Julian engaged in a feverish self-examination, wrestling with thoughts of the person he had become during his relentless pursuit of success. What if this dinner became an opportunity not only to reconnect with his family but also to grapple with the truth of who he was beneath the layers of wealth and ambition? He decided to jot down thoughts that could guide him through the evening. He started drafting potential conversation topics, anecdotes from his corporate life intertwined with reflections on family. Yet, the more he wrote, the more he felt the impending sense of inadequacy. This dinner was about being vulnerable, not rehearsed, about being authentic rather than polished. As he left his apartment, dressed in a way that felt both earnest and deliberate, he realized he needed to approach this night differently than he ever had before. Where once he would have strategized every word, now he resolved to listen as much as he talked. The fear of rejection was still there, gnawing at the corners of his determination, but he refused to let it overshadow his commitment. The drive to Emma's was a blur, the familiar cityscape flickering past him like the memories playing in his mind. The moments he had taken for granted, the laughter, the quiet afternoons, those fleeting glances of love from Emma seemed like relics from an earlier life. They were now precious treasures he longed to reclaim. As he arrived, he took a moment to breathe before stepping into the building. The flickering lights in the lobby seemed ironically cheery, a stark contrast to his internal turmoil. He ascended the stairs, each step echoing with a mix of hope and anxiety. When he knocked, time stretched, each second heavier than the last. Emma opened the door, her expression carefully neutral yet unmistakably guarded. "You're on time," she remarked, her tone layered with skepticism. Julian took that as a modest win, a sign he hadn't missed yet another chance to show up. "Thanks for having me," he replied, his voice steady under the weight of her gaze. Inside, Mia and Jake were visible, glancing at him with curiosity blending into wariness. He felt exposed, raw under the scrutiny of his own family. As they settled at the table, he glanced around, noticing every detail: the family photos lining the wall, a reminder of the lives they had built without him. Memories flooded back, and with them, the understanding that this wasn't just dinner, it was potentially the beginning of the difficult and rewarding path of healing. Julian cleared his throat, ready to speak, but at that moment, he realized the truth. He needed to let them voice what was unsaid first. The narrative was not his to dictate, it was a collective journey they would embark on together, and then, as the first question hung in the air, the atmosphere shifted, the defiance in Emma's eyes softened briefly, and Julian wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, he was beginning to understand the gravity of the moment. But before he could articulate his thoughts, Mia stunned him with a question that rattled the fragile foundation he was trying to rebuild. "Why did you leave us, Dad?" The room jolted with that simple yet devastating inquiry, provoking a torrent of emotions beneath his resolute facade. Was he ready to confront that truth, or would the answer reveal a man unprepared for the consequences of his choices? As the air flickered with anticipation, Julian felt the walls closing in yet again, their weight pressing down even harder, daring him to face his past head-on. What could he possibly say that would bridge the chasm he had created? Julian's mind spun in that moment, the question reverberating like a gong, both piercing and clarifying. Why did he leave them? The air felt dense, each second stretching out as he stared into the eyes of his daughter, wide with raw vulnerability. In her question lay the embodiment of his failures, a complex tapestry woven from ambition and neglect, now unraveling before him. "Why did you leave us, Dad?" Mia repeated, her voice quaking slightly, the challenge embedded in her innocence. Julian swallowed hard, his throat constricting under the weight of 1,000 words he once thought he could mask with wealth and status. The silence snapped taut, pressing down on him. What could he say that wouldn't come off as a thin veneer of excuses? He saw Jake fidgeting beside Mia, his young face mirroring curiosity tinged with hurt. His voice faltered. It was the moment he had both dreaded and yearned for, a chance to face the truth. He needed to open the floodgates of his heart instead of barricading themselves with feeble explanations. "I was scared," he finally admitted. The honesty unleashed a wave of vulnerability that streamed through him. "So scared of failing to provide everything you deserved that I thought maybe by climbing higher, I could bring you all better options. It blinded me from seeing what I put at risk." Emma's brows knitted, the tension in her shoulders relaxing fractionally as she met his gaze, searching for sincerity in his eyes. For the first time, he saw a flicker of hope amidst the skepticism. "That doesn't make it okay," she responded quietly, but Julian could sense her resolve softening. "We needed you here, Julian. Not just in the background of your successes." His heart raced as he contemplated the breach he'd created. He had convinced himself that his sacrifices justified the distance. Now, standing there, every justification crumbled under the weight of her words. He felt the urge to articulate his remorse bubbling to the surface, but he was reminded this was a conversation, not a performance. "Mia," he turned to her, trying to catch the innocence that was still apparent in her gaze. I do want to make this right. I know I can't erase the past, but I want to rebuild what we lost. I want to be here, now. Jake stirred, his eyes narrowing like he was processing an entirely foreign command. But how do we know you'll stick around this time? The question knocked the wind out of Julian's sails. He glanced at Mia, who was biting her lip, uncertain whether to accept his words he hoped carried the weight of conviction. His heart sank as he realized they were waiting for more than a promise, they longed for proof. I'll prove it, Julian said, determination hanging in the air. I can't promise perfection, but I will show up. For dinner, for school events, for everything. For the first time, he felt a spark of what it meant to be present, grounded not in the past he couldn't change, but in the future he could mold with meaningful actions. They needed to hear not just the declaration, but also the affirmative steps he was willing to take, to show up consistently. You don't just get to decide you want to be a dad again, Julian, Emma interjected, her voice firm yet less harsh. It requires work. Every day. Are you ready for that? Feeling the weight of her question settle on him, Julian nodded slowly, realizing that true change wouldn't come from grand declarations but the dedication in small, everyday moments. Restoring trust would take time, effort, and humility, elements he had relegated to the background of his prior life. As conversations began to pick up the pieces of the fragile atmosphere, Julian sensed a shift within himself. He wasn't merely seeking redemption, he was discovering a deeper purpose. And as he stared at the children he barely recognized yet ached to embrace, he realized that love was an action as much as it was a feeling. But just as hope began to flicker in the room, the intercom buzzed suddenly, so loud and jarring it sent them all jumping in their seats. Julian's heart raced. Was this a reminder of his failing existence intruding on this pivotal moment? Emma's gaze shot towards the door. What now? She murmured, casting a wary glance around. In a heartbeat, Julian understood the table before them was but one piece in a much larger game, one that was just beginning to unfold. Would he be equipped to face whatever or whoever was waiting? As he held his breath, the question loomed, a harbinger of the struggles still ahead. What awaited them outside this fragile bubble of honesty? The intercom buzzed again, a siren call laced with an ominous tension that seeped into Julian's bones. With each second stretching like elastic, he saw Mia and Jake lean forward, tension etched on their young faces, their innocence suddenly shadowed by apprehension. What could disrupt this fragile moment of candor? Stay here, he instructed, almost instinctively taking a step towards the door. Julian's heart raced as he approached, each step echoing the uncertainty rising within him. Outside, the world buzzed with activity, voices mingled, laughter cut through the air, but that was not what concerned him. He pushed the door open slowly, bracing himself for an encounter that could disrupt everything he hoped to rebuild. What greeted him was not a confrontational figure but instead a face he never thought he'd see outside the confines of boardrooms and galas. Sarah, his ex, stood just beyond the threshold, her eyes wide and frantic. The calm, composed woman he once knew now looked raw, almost desperate, as icy winds swirled around her, stirring the leaves at her feet. Julian, she said, her voice laced with urgency, I didn't know where else to go. He scrutinized her for a heartbeat, recalling the years of shared dreams now tangled with regrets. At that moment, he remembered the profound ache of lost connections, one he had neglected for far too long. What is going on? He asked cautiously, trying hard to quell the emotions warring within him. Emma, she said, her breath hitching. We need to talk. It's about the kids. An echo of dread washed over him. The tension crashed through the doorway like an uninvited guest, instantly filling the space he had just carved for honesty and openness. What about them? He managed, the words coming out with a rough edge. They're scared, Julian. Sarah's voice trembled, solidifying the gravity of her statement. They've been asking where you are. They're at the edge of understanding your absence and I fear how they might perceive it. That simple admission rocked him to his core. Julian's present resolve shattered as he instinctively gestured towards the living room, inviting her in against every rational thought. Come in. Let us talk. He led her to the table where Mia and Jake remained, their kid-sized worries temporarily forgotten. But the familiar grip of guilt surged anew as he felt their eyes shift awkwardly between them, sensing the undercurrents of a situation unfolding beyond their comprehension. As Sarah took a seat, the room crackled with palpable tension. Julian's heart sank further at the realization that his past was encroaching on his attempts to forge a new future. The very foundations he was trying to build were threatened once more, with every detail of his history bubbling to the surface as she began to speak. But while Sarah spoke guardedly with pre-prepared thoughts, Julian felt a swell of determination rise within him. He needed to reclaim his narrative before it slipped out of reach. Listen, if we're going to have this conversation, let us be fully honest. There's nothing between us anymore that the kids shouldn't hear. Just outside that bubble of directness and connection, the world felt charged with uncertainty. Could he be the father they needed even when old chapters refused to stay closed? As Sarah paused, considering his words, Julian's thoughts swirled. What was the price of his newfound commitment as layers of his past threatened to slip back into focus? Underneath the strain of the confrontation, he wondered if the cracks in his carefully erected facade were beginning to show. Was he truly prepared for the challenges he now faced, confronting ghosts of his past as he tried to forge a future? The weight of that question lay thick in the air, stirring a desperation he had not anticipated. How far would he go to protect that which he wanted to rebuild? And with that, he sensed that revelation hung on the horizon, just out of reach, beckoning him to a crossroads that would define not just his role as a father but as a man ready to reprogram his entire existence. What choices would he make next in this tangled web of connection and consequence? The moment hung in the air, and Julian's heart thudded like a warning drum in his chest as he met Sarah's gaze. He felt each silent second stretch into an eternity, charged with unvoiced fears and unresolved emotions. Maybe we should compromise, Sarah suggested, hesitance etched in her expression. Perhaps I could tell them a different story about your absence. Something less complicated. Julian clenched his jaw at her suggestion. Concealing the truth would only further alienate him from Mia and Jake, an idea that repulsed him. No, he said, letting the word carry the weight of his decision. They deserve to know everything. His conviction surprised him. Beneath the layers of uncertainty, a sense of clarity flickered, igniting within him the courage to confront not only Sarah but his own fears. He needed to redefine himself not only as a father but as the man who had walked away. It was time to take responsibility instead of hiding behind excuses. Sarah's brow furrowed, and for a moment, she seemed overwhelmed by the intensity of his resolve. But then the fear recaptured her features. Julian, you have no idea how they'll react. This could frighten them even more. The thought gnawed at him. While he had been lost in his own turmoil, his children had suffered in silence. They were at the precipice of forging associations, of grappling with emotional truths. Julian realized that addressing his absence wasn't merely a matter of truth, it was about actively participating in their healing. Then let us face that fear together, he said, his voice steady despite the turbulence within. I want them to feel like they have a choice, a connection to both of us. I want to help them understand. Help them understand what? Sarah countered, her skepticism rising. That I'm trying to change, Julian declared, words flowing with a newfound fervor. All I've ever done is let my choices obstruct their reality. Now, I need to support them in whatever way they need. They should know I'm willing to do the hard work, regardless of our history. As he spoke, Julian saw flickers of recognition pass through Sarah's eyes, an acknowledgement of shared parental responsibility. But this acknowledgement also brought on another wave of apprehension. What if he wasn't enough? What if fostering this new narrative illuminated inadequacies still lurking within him? He glanced toward Mia and Jake, who were now peering, concern flitting across their faces. In that moment, it crystallized this wasn't just about his bond with Sarah but the very essence of his role as their father. They were grasping for a connection between the broken pieces of their lives, a chance to rebuild from the chaos. What if they reject you? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper but heavy with concern. The question reverberated in his mind, slamming against the walls of his determination. Rejection felt like a possibility he had to confront, But what was rejection compared to seeing their faces light up with understanding and perhaps rebuilding trust? Then I must be ready to face it, Julian replied, steeling himself. With a calculated breath, he prepared himself for what lay ahead, driven by a relentless urgency to nurture the bonds he had once taken for granted. He stood tall against the storm, fueled by the understanding that failure was merely an opportunity cloaked in rejection. "Let me talk to them, Sarah," he implored, seeking to bridge the divide between his past and his purpose. As she nodded uncertainly, he leaned towards the kids. This was pivotal. He needed to be open, raw, and real. The words jostled within him, and for the first time, he felt an electric thrill behind his vulnerability. Mia and Jake were absorbing each nuance of their fractured family, and he was about to hand them the brush to redefine their shared story. "Can we start fresh?" he asked. "Will you listen to me?" Just as the words fell from his lips, a shift in their demeanor broke through. They looked to one another, and in their eyes, Julian detected a flicker of hope tugging at the corners of his heart. But before he could finish his thought, a sudden realization struck him. Could he truly stand the gaping maw of their uncertainty? What would that fresh start cost him? His pride, his past ambitions, and would he be prepared for their verdict? The tension settled like dust, ready to ignite a fire within, a pivotal moment lying just at the threshold of acceptance. Would he rise to embrace the unfolding chapter ahead, or would he falter before the weight of honesty? With questions lingering like storm clouds overhead, he could feel the pulse of destiny quickening. His next steps would dictate not just their future but his own evolution as a person ready to embrace the unknown. Julian's heart raced, but he pushed through the torrent of emotions swirling in his chest. He needed to show his children the truth behind his absence, the rawness of his experience, and not just the polished facade he often wore. As he waited for a response, the silence loomed ominously, accentuating the vulnerability of his position. This was not merely about him, it was about forging a path for Mia and Jake to reclaim their own stories. "Okay, Dad," Mia finally said, her voice a fragile thread connecting them through the chasm of uncertainty. "We'll listen." Jake nodded, though his brow was still furrowed with skepticism. Julian felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest, but he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. These children deserved the truth, but its delivery demanded careful planning. In that moment, he took a deep breath, centering himself for the gravity of what he was about to do. His voice, usually calm and composed in business meetings, cracked slightly, betraying his internal struggle. "I want to tell you about why I've been away and why I want to be here now." Drawing from the well of his deepest regrets, Julian began to share his story, the fractured pieces of his life woven together with honesty. He spoke of his ambitions, the entrapment that money can sometimes create, and the choices that led him to believe he had to leave. Each word felt like an unzipping of a protective layer around his heart. He paused, looking into Mia and Jake's eyes, searching for signs of understanding, or for bombshells of rejection. "But the truth is, I was wrong to think that leaving was the answer. I should have been here, battling through our problems together." Mia's expression softened, but Jake's steeliness remained intact, his arms crossed defiantly. Julian recognized the walls his son had built to protect himself and knew he needed to address them. He turned his focus to Jake. "I know you have every right to be mad at me, and I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I just want a chance to prove I can do better, to earn back your trust." Silence enveloped them again. Julian felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into the unknown, unsure if the ground below would catch him. The reality of their situation hit him harder than any business setback. It was raw, it was personal, and so very poignant. "I want to be the father you need," Julian insisted, desperation lacing his voice. "But it means being here with you both, every step of the way. I don't want to hide anymore. I want to learn. I want to grow." As Julian concluded, he felt a seismic shift in the atmosphere. The tension was palpable, yet he sensed a crack in Jake's defenses. There was a questioning look in Mia's eyes, a silent plea for resolution. Julian steeled his resolve. This was just the beginning. "Dad," Mia's voice broke through the silence again. "What if you fail us again?" The vulnerability in her question struck Julian like a bolt. The fear of failure loomed over him, whispering doubts in his mind. What if he truly could not change? What if this attempt was just another fleeting moment of hope, destined to collapse into disappointment? I'm willing to fight for that chance, Julian replied slowly, grounding his voice with determination. But I'm here to listen too. I want to know what you both need from me. Jake unfolded his arms, tension momentarily thawing, but still, he hesitated. What if you leave again? How do we know you won't just? Because I know how it felt, Julian interrupted, the urgency of his past fanning the flames of his present. Every day I've been away, I felt like a piece of me was hollow. Your lives matter more to me than my comfort. I need to be better for you, and I will do whatever it takes to make that happen. As shadows of doubt struggled to permeate the budding atmosphere of hope, Julian recognized something significant within himself. This moment was not just about the children, it was about the man he aspired to be, a father who wouldn't shy away from the fight, but what Julian did not yet realize was that this confrontation would be merely a prelude to the deeper battles ahead. The road to redemption was fraught with challenges he had yet to anticipate, and the true test of his resolve lay beyond the initial admission of failure. The next question hung thick in the air: could Julian truly dismantle the walls built by his past and embrace the rigorous journey of rebuilding, or would the specter of his former self rear its head, spiraling them back into darkness? With their gazes piercing through the remnants of his uncertain heart, Julian understood that the next chapter of his life demanded not just change, but transformation. Would he be ready for the battles yet to come? The moment of truth loomed just ahead, another fork in the road presenting itself like a thunderclap in the night. The days that followed were marked by an impending sense of discovery. For Julian, every moment spent with Mia and Jake felt simultaneously exhilarating and excruciating. It was a strange dance of vulnerability where he both craved connection and feared rejection. Each interaction reminded him of the walls he'd built around himself, yet he was acutely aware that this was no longer a time for walls. Determined to engage his children beyond the surface conversation, Julian devised small activities that slowly would bring them together. He suggested they take family walks, a stark contrast to the business meetings he was accustomed to. Nature had a calming effect, one that could strip away layers of pretense. As they walked the tree-lined paths, he tried to encourage dialogue by asking open-ended questions. What do you want to do this weekend? Or how did your week go? More often than not, silence filled the gaps where answers should have been. Julian felt the weight of his previous absence bears down on the atmosphere like thick fog. But he refused to retreat, framing each moment as a new chance. Let us explore together, he said, his tone both inviting and firm. I want to be a part of your lives. Yet, every time they reached gestures of camaraderie, a shared laugh over an inside joke or a moment of physical closeness, Julian's heart gripped with apprehension. What if they pulled away again? His workshops, filled with professional expertise, now seemed slight when placed beside the vast emotional landscapes of family dynamics. It was hard to ignore how a simple business deal had once consumed his life while moments of emotional authenticity slipped through his fingers. Nonetheless, he took one step at a time, standing firm in his resolve to be present. Then one evening, while helping Mia with her homework, an unguarded moment cracked his fears wide open. She hesitated over a math problem before her frustration manifested in tears. I just can't do it, Dad. In that moment, Julian was reminded of his own struggles, the pressure, the weight of not measuring up. Instead of redirecting her frustration towards a solution, he chose to sit in the discomfort with her. Sometimes, it's okay to struggle, he told her, drawing from a place of honesty he had long neglected. I've faced my own failures too, and it doesn't define us. The barriers began to shift, Mia relaxed, if only briefly, and together they tackled the problem. For the first time, Julian felt a spark of the father he wished to be, one who understood not just numbers but emotions. On another front, Jake was still a fortress, resisting Julian's attempts at connection. But Julian was determined. He recognized that his son's anger was an anchor to a painful reality. One night, Julian caught Jake sitting quietly in the living room, the glow of a screen illuminating his face. Steeling himself, Julian drifted into the space, setting aside his anxiety about missteps. Can we talk? He ventured, his voice barely above a whisper but filled with earnestness. Jake turned slowly, eyes heavy with skepticism. About what? About everything, Julian wanted to say. About all he had done wrong and the fervent desire to make it right. But instead, he stuck to simple truths. I want to know how you're feeling about me, about us. For an agonizing moment, Jake's gaze hardened. You'd rather just run away again. Julian's chest clenched at the weight of the accusation. It was a truth he had to confront. You're right, Julian confessed, each word cutting deeper than he'd anticipated. I ran, and I failed you. But I'm here now and I want to stay, no matter how hard it gets. Jake's eyes softened marginally. Julian felt a ripple under the surface of his son's stoicism. Could there be room for understanding? Could the fortress finally start to crack? As the week rolled on, Julian continued to push through uncertainty, both at home and within himself. He would never shy away from the rawness of their history, but that realization also brought clarity he needed to find his own footing. The learning curve stretched before him like an endless road, but while he grasped the contours of fatherhood, a chilling reminder lurked at the back of his mind. The world he had left behind, which once brimmed with ambition and power, had a way of knocking on his door. That past didn't just disappear, it mandated his attention. A business proposal loomed over them, one that threatened to thrust him back into the shadows of his former life. As he faced this duality of being a father and a business leader, Julian could feel the tension rising. A pivotal crossroads approached, aligning professional pressures with personal responsibilities that could tear apart the very threads of the connection he was beginning to weave. One fateful night, as uncertainty loomed with both his family and negotiation deadlines, the notification ping on his phone yanked Julian from his thoughts. An ominous text flashed on the screen that would change everything. Would he be drawn back into the depths of his previous life, or could he forge a path forward? The moment of truth was upon him, igniting the tension that could no longer be ignored. What awaited him in the shadows that had once defined his existence? Julian would have no choice but to answer that call, setting the stage for pivotal decisions that could shape not only his future but also that of Mia and Jake. Julian stared at the message on his phone, each word echoing with the weight of consequence. Investors are pulling out. We need your decision by the end of the week. The specter of his past loomed larger than ever, gripping him with an urgency he hadn't felt in years. As he paced the warmly lit living room, a stark contrast to the chaos within, Julian grappled with the reality of who he had been versus who he aspired to be for Mia and Jake. He could see them, sharing quiet laughter in the kitchen as they worked on a puzzle, an innocent moment filled with camaraderie he feared could be swept away in the tide of business demands. The laughter echoed in his mind, a reminder of what mattered, yet the allure of his successful past whispered sweetly, begging him to return. Dad? Are you okay? Jake's voice pierced through his tumultuous thoughts. Julian turned to face his son's curious gaze, where the remnants of skepticism lingered, still not entirely gone, but less rigid than before. Instinctively, the business-minded reflex kicked in, reminding him of board meetings, deadlines, and strategies. All good, buddy, he replied. But as soon as he spoke, he felt disingenuous. This moment was far more critical than any boardroom negotiation. It was a turning point. After tucking the phone away, Julian approached the kitchen, where laughter still surrounded him. Can I join in? He asked, his voice tinged with sincerity. Mia looked up, her face lighting up with a smile that seemed to affirm his presence instead of question it. As they worked harder on connecting tiny pieces of cardboard, Julian determined this time he would not leave them for the allure of corporate success. Dinner was an adventure that evening, filled with stories and banter that Julian frequently wished for. They tasted the warmth of their shared experiences, an encasement of a family that, despite the cracks, offered a sense of hope. Julian sensed that every laugh and glance softened the tension between them. In those moments, he felt the heavy pressure of expectations lift, replaced by the realization that connection was born from authenticity, not rhetoric. Yet, underneath it all, the reality of his volatile past persisted. While sitting across from Mia and Jake, Julian wrangled with the decision pending on his phone. The sense of urgency clawed at the edges of his newfound role, once again placing him at a crossroads where both paths beckoned, each laden with different burdens. Can we go to the park tomorrow? Mia asked suddenly, drawing Julian from his thoughts. It was an innocent request, but it anchored him in the present, a task far more compelling than the corporate ladder he'd been climbing for years. Of course, he replied, buoyed by the sincerity of her request. Maybe we can pack a picnic, too. They agreed, and layered with excitement, Julian felt a poignant wave of realization wash over him. The promise he had made to reconnect with them was blossoming into something tangible, a chance to restructure their lives together, one interaction at a time. That night, after the kids had been tucked into bed, Julian sat in contemplation, the fading echoes of happiness curling around him like a warm blanket. He knew he needed to come to terms with his professional obligations as well. Could he be both a father and a businessman? That evening, he cracked open his laptop, determined to confront the investor crisis head-on. In the following days, Julian approached the impending financial disaster with a renewed sense of purpose. Inspired by the belief he was rebuilding at home, he carefully crafted a proposal that highlighted stability, growth, and a commitment to transparency. But rather than simply prioritizing profits, he contemplated weaving their values into it, something he had neglected for far too long. At the pitch meeting, Julian stood before potential investors with the same electric energy he had previously reserved for stock presentations. This time, however, he blended heartfelt narratives about accountability and growth with numbers that detailed their budding tech breakthrough. While he maintained confidence in the business aspect, there was also something far more critical. They needed him to be a leader who didn't shy away from past mistakes. To his relief, the investors responded positively, intrigued by not just the numbers but the integrity behind Julian's proposals. As commitments were made, Julian recognized a shift within himself. He was not the same man who had prioritized work over family. Finally, after weeks of juggling emotions and responsibilities, Julian found himself at the park, the sun shining bright overhead, casting shadows through the trees where laughter echoed around him. The outstretched eyes of Mia and Jake hunted for his approval as they darted around and played joyfully. For the first time in years, joy swelled in his heart. He had chosen them, and in doing so, he rediscovered a part of himself long buried beneath the demands of ambition. "Dad! Look!" Mia shouted, swinging vigorously on the swings, her spirit infectious. In that moment, he realized the success he had forged in the corporate world paled in comparison to this small but significant achievement, being present for his children. As he gathered his kids close to celebrate every small victory, an ice cream cone here, a game of frisbee there, Julian felt full. He had not merely crossed a bridge in his life, he had built one brick by brick, with care, precisely because he now understood relationships flourish where presence exists. Each moment marked a deeper understanding of balance. He was a businessman, yes, but more importantly, he was their father, ready to embrace both roles in harmony. Then came the final weight, the sum of his journey. Julian took a deep breath, essence of satisfaction filling him. He had come to terms with the necessity of vulnerability, of acceptance, and most importantly, the realization of what true success looked like, a family bound by love and second chances. As he saw them laugh and play before him, Julian smiled. This was the achievement he had always desired, not a new deal or a raise, but redemption. True fulfillment resided in this precious partnership, one where he learned to weave love, honesty, and integrity into the fabric of their daily lives. With that understanding firmly planted in his heart, Julian drove home with a sense of purpose, equal burdens shared with equal joy, and triumphs to appreciate. He had conquered his inner turmoil, committing to becoming the father his children needed, and in doing so, finally took his first step toward true fulfillment and a life well lived. Now, to those still grappling with their own dualities, don't wait any longer. You need to subscribe now for more powerful stories of personal transformation. Leave a like now to support the journey toward growth. Comment on your thoughts and feelings about this conclusion. And above all, share instantly this epic tale with at least 5 friends who need to ignite their spirit of perseverance and self-discovery. This is the moment to demonstrate your support for lasting change.